Warning: this episode will contain graphic, detailed scenes of self-harm and talks of suicide and suicide attempts. Discretion is advised. For me, depression has always been this dark, warmth-sucking creature in the back of my mind that's always telling me I'm not good enough. It's constantly screaming my insecurities at me and telling me that no matter what I do, no one will ever love me, want to be around me, or even simply tolerate me. It's always telling me I'm too fat and I'm this worthless, useless piece of shit that will amount to absolutely nothing in life. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Depression for me is funny in the sense that I can literally feel and be happy and joyful and relaxed, but it's always there, just looming and lurking, waiting for an opportune moment to slip in and take away all of those emotions I worked so hard on feeling. And maybe I'm not the only one that feels like that. There have been days where I haven't even cared about taking care of myself because my brain was so convinced that I didn't matter. So why should something as trivial as a shower matter, or brushing my hair, or teeth, or cleaning my room? My bedroom right now is not small piles of junk. No, it's mountains of dirty, stinky laundry, garbage, and belongings that I haven't been through in ages because I've let it pile up to the point where it's now overwhelming and anxiety inducing. This isn't something that I'm proud of, and it's not something I easily share because it's shameful and embarrassing. I can't even walk from one side of my room to the other, and it makes me sad to think that. I have no one else to blame but myself, though, for that, right? At least, that's what my head keeps telling me. I'm nothing but a miserable fuck-up. Just fucking kill yourself already. But wait, don't do it in the house. They won't be able to get your fat ass out. Those kinds of thoughts used to run through my head daily. I used to be completely enveloped by this all-consuming, deep-rooted sadness every single day. For me, there was no light at the end of the tunnel. I just couldn't see it. I felt like I was constantly falling, always in the self-destructive downward spiral. I didn't care about anything, especially myself. I keep talking about it in the past tense, but really I'm still struggling with it. But in the more recent months, I've learned how to handle it so much better than I have in the past years, and it's taken me those years to reach this point. So how did this all start for me? What really threw the chemicals in my head all out of whack? Even after years of therapy, I still haven't pinned down the exact moment, and I'm not sure I ever will, but I know there are a lot of contributing factors. In school, I was never a normal kid. I was exceedingly above my peers intellectually in the elementary years of school, and that led to me being outcast from an early age. I'm also somewhere on the autism spectrum, and I had, and still have, a hard time picking up on social cues from my peers. That led to me being incredibly socially awkward and further outcast. I was a really easy target in grade school, and I never did stand up for myself. Mostly because whenever I tried, I would get really tongue-tied and it would just make things worse. There was even this one period where the kids at school found out that one of my favorite things was one of those coin-operated rides at the local Meijer was a purple dinosaur, and they tormented me for years, all the way through high school, by calling me Purple Dinosaur. They would tell me awful things like it had been destroyed in a fire, someone had broken it, or even that it had stopped working after I had rode it last because I was too fat for it. And I didn't really know until well into junior high school, but by then it was too late, and I already had trust issues, and just pushed everyone away. Everyone except for my best friend. She was such an amazing person. We met at the McDonald's in town, and honestly, we couldn't have been closer. We were kids when we met, so we ended up growing up together. So when I learned that she was diagnosed with leukemia, and after learning what that was, I did nothing but support her in her recovery and treatment. I visited her in the hospital. I helped her parents with her treatments and gave her emotional support. I was even going to shave my head for her when she lost her hair. When she died, I think that was when it really all began for me. I watched this person who was my person, my best friend, my person that I told everything to, slowly slip away. I was in the 8th grade when I got the news. Third period choir. I remember being called to the office and both my parents being there in the conference room, and them telling me that she had passed in her sleep earlier that morning. It was like a bucket of cold water had been dumped over my head. And for as long as I live, I will never, ever forget that morning. It was my freshman year of high school when my mental health really started to take a turn. I was still getting over the loss of my friend and dealing with some pretty heavy bullying at school, which had escalated to kids finding my home and egging my parents' cars. I kept pretty much to myself and did a pretty good job at pushing others away because at that point I had zero trust for my peers. On Christmas break freshman year, I had my first suicide attempt. I just had never felt so alone, so unable to trust anyone, and so heavy with this burden of irritability and frustration that I didn't know how to cope with and just wanted it to all go away. I was hospitalized for about a week and put on medication. I hated how the meds made me feel because they made me feel nothing. And even now as an adult, I hate taking my meds sometimes because I don't like how they make me feel. But unlike back then, I know that they help more in the long run and do more good than harm. When I stopped taking my meds, I would fall deep into the rabbit hole of self-harm and soon found that I wasn't hurting myself because I wanted to die, but because I was addicted to the pain and the escape it provided me. I was very ritualistic about my self-harm. I would use blades from pencil sharpeners. I would clean them with alcohol and then clean my arm. And then I would press the blade into my arm and drag it across my skin as fast as I could. The rush I would get from the burning pain was something that I became addicted to. The feeling of the blood running down my arm, the feeling of my skin splitting open, it was absolutely exhilarating. Soon after that is when I developed my addictive personality and I found I got addicted to things very easily. But that's something for another episode. So now that I've laid out the backstory for how my depression came about, I want to tell you how it is still inhibiting my day-to-day life. It's something that I struggled with in college, and it's a big part of the reason I had a mental break and had to drop out. I had gotten so far behind on my classes due to a lack of sleep because of a really inconsiderate and bad roommate. So the lack of sleep just exacerbated my depression and my depression symptoms, and my depression symptoms triggered my anxiety, and my anxiety triggered my... we're going to stop there and just say it was a domino effect in my mind that caused it to basically self-destruct. I tried to kill myself by overdosing on some narcotics that I had left over from an injury I had sustained earlier in the year. After coming home, I was pretty lost. I didn't really know what to do with myself, and I didn't know where life for me was headed next. Depression hit hard. I was constantly bombarded by overwhelming feelings of not being good enough, and this sadness that consumed me in such a way that I can't put it into words. I hated going to work so much that I eventually quit. I became addicted to food again and gained a bunch of weight, and I self-medicated with food, all because I wanted to escape these thoughts that were running rampant in my head. Chores and housework were falling to the wayside, and when dishes would pile up in the sink, it would cause me so much anxiety that I would just ignore them and hope that they would go away. This caused a lot of strain on me and my family. My mom and I fought a lot. More often than not, I would feel like I wasn't good enough for anything, even something as simple as washing a dish. Weeks would go by and I would just slip further and further into this pit of darkness where the only things I could focus on were the wretched, self-loathing thoughts my mind would scream at me at 2 a.m. My mind convinced me that reaching out to anyone was wrong, and that by doing so, I wasn't actually helping myself, but being a burden to whoever answered. And so, I isolated myself against my will. Kept telling everyone I was fine every time something set off another depressive episode or gave me another panic attack. You're fat, you're ugly, you're worthless, piece of shit. Absolutely no one would miss you if you fucking killed yourself, and if you did, they'd eventually forget you and move on with their lives. These are all things my brain would scream at me over and over again, louder and louder, until they were the only things I could hear. There would be nights where I would sob so hard into my pillows that my back and sides would cramp and I couldn't breathe. There would be, and still are, times where I get into such a deep funk that I know things need to get done, but for some reason, I just can't physically do them. I keep telling myself, okay, you need to get the cat litter done. You need to get the dishes done. You need to finish writing the script for your next podcast episode. But I'll continue to just lay in bed, becoming more and more depressed and sad, and eventually I'll just fall asleep. It's like I have zero executive function anymore. So things tend to just build up and up and up until they're so out of control that I just shut down and don't handle them anymore. For me, depression is more than just being sad all the time. It's literally like my system is depressed. It's in the name. It's this monster that has hijacked my brain and makes me unable to do the things that need to be done. It violently screams every single thing I hate about myself in a voice that only I can hear until my ears are ringing. Sometimes it lasts for days until it's all I can do to just wake up, go to work, and get back home again, doing the bare minimum at anything I need to put the slightest amount of effort into. Depression has caused me to lash out at so many people because at the time I didn't know any other way of processing that emotion, and thus it's cost me so many friends in the long run. Doing something as simple as the dishes can take me days to do simply because I'm so physically tired all the time, and I have an easier time convincing myself that I would rather play video games or sleep than get chores done. It's something that frustrates me to no end, and the longer things go without getting done, the more depressed and overwhelmed I get, and it's just this never-ending cycle. There are times where the cat litter doesn't get done that day, or the dishes pile up in the sink, and right now, as I said earlier, my bedroom, I can't even see the floor or walk from one end to the other. These aren't things that I'm proud of. And one day I hope I can fix them about myself. I can literally be lying in bed, mentally screaming at myself that I need to go do the dishes or the cat litter or my laundry, but for hours I'll just idly scroll through social media until I actually need to go to bed because I work night shift, or my mom comes home as I'm 23 and still living with my parents. Quick side note, absolutely nothing wrong with that. Fight me. And then starts asking why things aren't done. I wish that it was as simple as just get up and do the thing. I wish I could just see something that needed to be done and do it, because that would make my life a million times easier. I'm not sure if this lack of being able to actually do the thing is caused by my depression, though I'm most certain that it is, but I know for a fact that it's a key contributing factor to it continuing to stay. I also know that if I can't get over it and fix that part of myself, I'm going to have a really hard time moving forward with life. And I think that kind of self-awareness is a really good thing to have. Because if you're not aware of your own problems, how will you know what needs to be fixed, right? I do know I've come a long way from where I was. I'm no longer lashing out at people, and I've learned to process the volatile emotions that depression can bring a whole lot better. I think that since there are so many factors that caused my depression, it's going to take many different factors to make it go away too. And maybe it will never go away, but hopefully just be more non-existent in my head and my life. I am constantly trying not to let it control me, but depression can be such a heavy burden to bear. It's this huge thing that's so multifaceted and ties into so many aspects of my life, so this probably isn't going to be the only episode I have on it. While I have a cocktail of other mental illnesses and proudly call myself crazy, depression is the biggest one I have, and there are days where it swallows me up whole and completely consumes me. There's this never ending void like feeling to it that makes it seem as if I could both talk forever and not at all about it. I'm so proud of myself for how far I've come, but I know that I still have such a far way to go. But for those listening who might be thinking that it's too much and they can't handle it, let me tell you right now that you can. I know that you can. You've made it this far, and I know that you can make it so much farther. If you had asked me a year ago if I'd have a full-time job, working with substance abuse clientele and taking classes to get my counseling assistant license, I would have laughed in your face. I'm amazed at the opportunities that have presented themselves to me, and so incredibly happy with myself that I hung on long enough to see them. Depression is this thing that will constantly try and weigh you down. And even now, I'm still struggling to break another one of the thousands of chains I feel it has wrapped around me. But as someone like me, who has lost friends and education opportunities and job offers because of this monster, can make it to where I am today, then I know that you can too with every fiber of my being. Just remember that every day, no matter how bad, is just one step closer to where you want to be. Thank you for listening.